I moved! Which sort of explains the slow upload speed, but I mean, I haven't even unpacked yet. G'day, I'm Mitch. Welcome to Lounge Room Hobbies, and we're playing catch up at the moment. Well, I am at least. Trying to get through a huge backlog of video footage, all while unpacking after I moved to Tasmania. So without too much further ado, let's get into building Karanak. There's probably no good way to open a clamshell package, but I've found the easiest way is this side cutting for a really important reason. The instructions. They're kind of hidden, right? And this was something I wasn't aware of, is that inside sheet that has that pretty picture on the front is also the instructions. So if you cut it through the top, you probably cut your instructions. And my first discovery on this kit after finding the instructions was honestly, the heads are split in half. I wasn't ready for that. I mean, that just screams problematic build almost straight off the bat. So why problematic build? Imagine for a second that you're brand new to this hobby, or that you've never picked up a model kit before in your life. You buy this cool three-headed dog, you bring it home, you open this clamshell, and the first thing you discover is that every head in the box is split down the middle. How are you supposed to fix that if you've never seen these models before? Well, you can maybe fix it with plastic glue, or you can kind of wade through what I'm about to do, gap filling. So once everything was cut out, first step was to clean off all the little tabs from the injection molding and those mold lines for the two pieces, for the pieces where it's squished together, right? Once those were all cleaned up, it was time to get to some test assembly. So why test assemble? Well, I had no idea how the pieces actually worked together and what needed to go together permanently first to kind of give a stable platform to paint, and what I needed to leave separate to clean up or gap fill or make painting parts of the model easier. It's just dry fitting at the end of the day. It's not wasted time, because at the end of the day, I only get one attempt at putting it together if I don't want to buy another model. I ended up assembling 90% of the model. The big parts that I left off though was that very top head. So 3 heads, 1 head's going to get in the way. And that top head was the single piece. It was the easiest to leave off because the other ones kind of came in multiple pieces that all needed to be together before gap filling rather than after. One of the things I've never been particularly comfortable with is green stuff. I've been doing this for the better part of 18, almost 20 years, and it's not something I've ever gotten better with. There's 2 reasons for that, and I'll go into them in a minute. The key thing here is that when I decided that I needed to gap fill, number one, I bought a big roll thinking I wanted to do some more sculpting, and it just sat in a drawer, so I had 4 meters of green stuff I wasn't using. And the other was I avoid it because I'm not sure what I'm doing with it. So I went looking for a few tutorials on YouTube. Surprise, surprise, yes, I use them too. It's what encouraged me to start this channel, is that I thought I had something to share. What I learned was that you have to practice. And I mean, that's something I should have seen coming anyway. But the reason I'm not comfortable with it is that I've always found it sticks to everything. Me, my tools, the model. But because it's sticking to everything, it never sits nicely. I've tried using water, and the key, and here's the top tip folks, mix it well and then use a decent lubricating agent. I'm using a moisturizer I stole from my girlfriend. She thought it was weird when I asked, but you know, now I get to use the moisturizer. And the other step is to make sure that because it's a 2-part epoxy, the blue bit makes the green bit hard. Where it touches, you have to cut that away, and you want to use slightly less blue than yellow because that gives you a softer mix. Fairly simple, right? But it's not self-explanatory. It's not something you'd figure out off the bat, and you need to know that to make this work properly. So once it's all mixed together, and with that moisturizer was ready to go, and the simple Games Workshop sculpting tools I got to work. And it's a patience game. You can't do it all in one go on one piece, especially if you're building up multiple layers. I was just trying to fill gaps. Rolling out tiny sausages, fitting them into the gap, and then trying to use the flattest bit of the tool that I had to smooth it out and blend in. And just lots of patience, lots of practice, and lots of lubricant. Where if it felt like it was starting to stick, I put a little bit more on the tool, I rubbed it off on my hand or on the palette, and then I kept going. And I got a result that I'm really happy with. If you're following along on my Instagram, you'll see that actually I've been experimenting a lot with green stuff recently there. This was done before I started that experimenting, and just with that little bit of practice and confidence and these little tweaks so that it wasn't sticking, I felt like I had control. I could do so much more, like sculpting an elbow on a quill grind. And it's making me want to sculpt things from scratch, and it feels like it's opened up a whole nother realm for me. So, well, there's my recommendation. I think it's the one that I always come up with here. If you're not sure, you can try it yourself anyway. The worst that happens is that you've just got to scrape it off and start over again. But if you start small, it's much easier to fix mistakes. The other really important thing, obviously I've left a head off to make it easier to access the bottom and top ones, and I've gap filled on that around the jaw. You need to test fit it while the green stuff is still soft to make sure the piece will go on. Also helps you figure out where, if at all, you need to add more gap filling. So for this, it's whether you can see the underside of the frill or not, and you just can't, so you don't have to fill it. The thing I'm never sure what to do with, because you always end up with leftovers, is what to do with leftover green stuff. This time around I made mushrooms, and then I used them on this model, and mushrooms were really easy. It was just rolling it into a shape and then messing around with the tools to build up detail. And at this point, the green stuff had been sitting out for a while, so it was quite solid and firm. So it was really easy to just carve detail into it, not have it move like crazy. It was really fun to make something from scratch that was just mine and different. Keep saying it, folks. If you're not sure, you can try it. I mean, the worst that happens is it goes wrong, and with what might be 5 cents of green stuff, I mean, come on, who cares? Just do it anyway. You're gonna throw it out otherwise. Once the green stuff was all cured, and before I attached the head for painting, I undercoated the underside of the frills of that third top head and around its shoulders. Just using Abaddon Black, because I knew that a spray wasn't going to get there, and I was going to be trying to struggle to jam a brush in, and knew that it didn't matter if it was black underneath the frill because it's just going to be shadowed anyway. I was just careful to leave the space where it's going to glue down clear so they get a nice strong bond. So with the hand painted undercoat, I then hit it with Chaos Black spray all over, and followed that with a zenithal prime. So if you don't know what that is, and this is the first time I've ever done it, so I basically didn't, it's hitting it with a white or a lighter spray 45 degrees above the model, and it gives a kind of a graduated fade. Adds some grays and whites over the top, you get really bright on top and fades down over the side. This is really important for what I was planning to do next, which was mess around with contrast paint. I've accumulated many things doing wargaming builds. Probably one of the strange ones is this piece of XPS foam. It's just a piece of insulation, and I have one piece, and I'm honestly not sure what the guy at the hardware store thought of me buying one piece, because people normally buy several, I guess, at least. One is a very strange buy because it doesn't do much, but it's a great tool for model making and hobby making because it's solid and dense but can be carved with a knife without flaking off like crazy. And it was this that I used to make what I'm affectionately going to call Pride Rock. And the reason I'm calling it Pride Rock is because when I asked my girlfriend what I should do for a base, she said a rock, a big rock like the Lion King. Here we are. This is me cutting out the block and then shaping it. Now there's no real trick to shaping it. I did some kind of drawing on it to give an idea of what I wanted, but really it was just cutting and chunking and breaking off with pliers and a knife until I got a shape I liked. And if I didn't quite like the shape, I just kept going at it. Less is more here, as in do less to start with, do the minimum, look at it and reassess, because it's really hard to put stuff back. You can start over again and that's great, but if you can avoid it, you just save yourself some time. So take a bit off, reassess, look at it, keep going. There's no other trick to shaping it beyond making sure your model will fit on top. You can use any tool to hand for carving foam. I ended up grabbing a couple of sculpting tools to kind of carve out deep channels. These work a lot better than sharp knives. You get kind of a bluntish edge, but get it some depth. Anything to hand will work for carving foam. I used a hot glue gun to fix it to the base. It's a very strong bond, but it also happens to melt the foam a little bit, so you kind of get it recessing itself. It attaches to the base and is never going to let go. I then wanted the top of the rock to have more texture to it, so I hit it with some PVA glue and then dipped it into straight bricky sand, which I've talked about before with the Rhino build. It's really cheap, it's dry, easy to find. I mean, or you can just go to a river or a beach. Either way, once the sand was on and dipped into that, it just gives a nice flat textured space. The trick I did with this though is that once the sand was on, I pushed the primed Karanak model into it to get a recessed space for his feet and the skull pile, so that it located itself on the top of the base and was really easy to tie in later. I also put some sand around the bottom of the base just to tie the rock into the base itself and clean this up so that it wasn't overlapping too much. The final step is a sealing stage for the foam, which also works to harden it. So I use a thing called Mod Podge. Black Magic Craft recommended, right? So if you haven't seen them, go check him out. He's significantly larger YouTube channel than I am, but I really love his stuff. He's what got me into building my own terrain a lot more. Mod Podge mixed with black paint. There's a kind of resin agent in the Mod Podge that adds in some stability and structure to the foam. It also means sometimes you can spray paint it. I didn't need to for this, but it means you can spray paint over the top without melting foam as well. Just tougher than hitting it with straight paint. Don't have Mod Podge, can't find it, PVA glue, and you can mix PVA glue with paint. It still works the same, and it'll have a similar kind of roll. And that's it for this build. Come back next time, I'll be painting him. Hopefully you enjoyed and got something out of this for the moment. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. With any luck, maybe I'll get unpacked by the time we get around to the next video. Until then, I'm Mitch, and I'll see you next time on Lounge Room Hobbies. Oh, I need a cup of tea. I could unpack.